in Parliament. She is here with us from the American Baptist Churches of the Rocky Mountain. We'd like to welcome her to the pulpit today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me today. I was very excited to get to be part of your community again. I've been here a couple times, but just visiting. So thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. And may that the Lord bless this conversation that we're going to have. So I want to start with 3 questions to think about. Who am I? Where do I fit in? What should I do? Those 3 questions I feel like we all experience in life, maybe over and over again, like what should I do with my life, purpose, where do I fit in, where do I belong, and my identity, who am I? Where is my identity belong? In Christ, in the church, with people? And it's nothing new, but these 3 questions are the biggest questions Gen Z and millennials ask themselves. And if they feel a part of a community, the other things will follow, is what research shows. And I think if you admitted, it would probably, if you didn't feel belonged here, you wouldn't be here in this room. So the question is, how do you do that for others? How do you make them feel belonged? Well, I think it's discipleship, which is loving others, which is what Christ did. Walk as Christ did. Discipleship is learned by walking with others. If you think about your journey, you probably accepted Christ and then somebody showed you what to do, or how to experience prayer, or how to read the Bible. But first, you probably felt cared for by that person and part of a community. Maybe it was just one person, but it might have been a small group. It might have been your grandma. It might have been your mom, your dad, or a grandma figure in the church, or a mom figure in the church. For me, it was a mom figure in the church. She met me where I was at. She noticed me. I was an 8th grader in Sunday school, and she knew I was off one day. And she asked, "Do you want to go get lunch after church?" And I was like, "Sure, that sounds great." I wasn't really fully involved in church at that point, but over that lunch, she listened. She didn't interrupt me. She cared for me. She showed empathy for what was going on in my world. She didn't judge what was going on in my world. She just listened. And from that, I felt like somebody cared for me in the church besides like my mom or my dad or my grandma. And that is important. Even today, I know that people think Gen Z is always on their phones, but when you have a conversation with them, they're just like everyone else, but they might not have had that as much because of COVID. They had school on a screen, right? So some of those skills, for some of the teens, they missed that. But it's still a conversation, and they want to feel cared for and belonged, not judged. And Christ did that in his whole journey. And one of the ones that I think sticks out to me the most, well, there's multiple, let's face that, but how he showed empathy for a couple people stick out to me. First, the woman at the well in John, he didn't judge her. He welcomed her into a conversation and then let her speak and asked a question and then answered. Asked a question and then answered. Same with Zacchaeus. Think about the meal. He went to Zacchaeus' house to share around the table. We all love food. That's like the easy thing to have a conversation with someone is, do you want to go to breakfast, lunch, have coffee? Coffee's probably a big one for college students or in their 20s, but because they usually need energy. But and some of them are laughing. That's good. But it's nothing complicated or new. on how to love someone, have a meal with them. And my friend Greg wrote a book called Table Life. And it's all about having conversations around the table. And how do you do that? Well, you share your story. And they might feel like they can share theirs then, and then that relationship builds. And that's what Christ did. He had his disciples for 3 years, but he kept learning about them, and they learned about him. It was a conversation. It was meals. And when I think about Becky, the lady that took me to lunch, she's still my mom figure today. But it's because we chose to do that over time. And it's because she showed me God's love in a point in my life that I needed it. She came to clean our house because my mom was sick. What person, as a teenager, you're like, why is she coming to clean our house? Well, I asked her, but I was shocked that it followed through. But the task of cleaning the house is all she did for a long time. But then we started having lunch together when she was there, or dinner, and just conversation happened. And loving someone is inviting them into your world, just like Christ did. He did that with his disciples. In our passage today, it's nothing new that he says in 1 John 2, but in verse 3, whoever says, I know him, but does not do what he commands is a liar, and the truth is not in that person. But if anyone obeys his word, love for God is truly made complete in them. This is how we know we are in him. Man. So if you don't love others, you're not keeping the command. And we're made complete because he can see him in us and how we live. And I want to hit on verse 3. It says, in the Greek word keep is an aorist tense. So do you guys know what an aorist tense is? I know it sounds weird. This means it's now ongoing and not complete. So keep is more like keeping and keep and kept, all in one word. So you're supposed to do that for your life, not just keep it right now. It kind of sounds like it's present tense in our language, but keeping his commands to love one another. And it's written on our hearts, meaning it's our nature. An analogy I used at the gathering that I really sticks out in my mind is a sponge. So think about your sponge and you soak up water. Eventually, what does it do? It gets full and it leaks because it can't hold it. And if your life, you're naturally soaking up Christ and walking with him, you'll leak his love to all that you meet naturally. That's what this passage is about, living naturally, walking as Christ walked, naturally, thinking of a sponge. You naturally love others. Radiating God's love is obeying God's word. But how do we do this? How do we love? What do you do in your daily life to love someone? Is there someone that you see at the coffee shop when you meet with others that you could have a conversation with gradually? Is it at the grocery store? I know this is a small town, kind of. I grew up in a town similar size. You usually run into someone you know, no matter where you go, I assume. Yeah. But do you actually have conversation with the people you run into? Or you just kind of say hi and you move on? Yeah, okay, there's laughing. That might be a little true for some people. But think about what you can do to just build that conversation. Maybe asking, do you have family in town if it's a young person? Oh, if they don't, maybe that's someone I can invite over eventually. Obviously, it might freak them out right away, some of them, but if they don't have family in town, or they're a family, but they don't have other family, it's like an easy conversation you can start having to pursue that person. And his command isn't new, to love one another. It's all over in John, in the Gospels. Basically, loving God and loving your neighbor is what we're supposed to do. And I think about a youth girl now, like my former youth girl. So back in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where I grew up, I went to basketball games. Simple task to get to know youth, just so you know. And they see you regularly there. And I was showing up because one of my youth girls was on the team. And there's this other girl, her name's Natalie, who was on the team. And she came to youth group because she was dating someone, but then kind of didn't come because they broke up, that situation. But I saw her at the grocery store. And my instinct was to say, "Hi, Natalie." And she looked at me like, "How do you know who I am?" And I was like, "Well, you're on Allie's basketball team." She goes, "You're right." And I was like, "You should come to youth group. I'll be your small group leader. And I'd love to have you there and see you. And I'm good luck on your game on whatever day it was going to be. I think it was going to be on Friday." She goes, "How do you know I have a game?" And I said, "Well, Allie's on your team. I'm coming." And she goes, "Oh." So I showed up on Friday, and then on Sunday, guess who came to youth group? It wasn't me, it was God, but she came to youth group, and she never stopped coming after that. And only because she tells me now, that's because you saw me, and you saw me for me, not because I was dating whoever in your youth group. And all I did was say hi, and good luck at your game on Friday. Like, it wasn't like a huge conversation, but it was because I was present in her life, per se, of coming to her games. And then we had coffee, because my rule is if they came to youth group or came to church, I pursued them to have coffee or lunch, because then you can build that relationship. And I know there was a challenge not so long ago in this community doing that same thing. So now I push you, how can you continue those conversations you had with that person that maybe you took to lunch on the challenge? Have you done it again, or was it I did it and check it off my list? Just a thought. But to walk as Christ walks is to proclaim him, and proclaiming him is loving others. That's what this passage is all about. It's not what Christ did as a sense of being crucified and doing all the miracles and having 12 disciples. No, it's about to love as he loved, to identify a need and fill it, to care for someone. There's so many conversations in the Bible, he comes to someone in need, or somebody in need comes to him and he fills it. To have others feel a part of a community. That's what he did. He brought people in and brought Gentiles in, and tax collectors, all the people that people thought they shouldn't be coming in, but they felt belonged and cared for by him. To have a relationship with others and love them where they're at, just like Becky did in my world, loving me where I was at and walking with me. My question for you is, when was the last time you cared for someone or loved someone not in your family and not in your generation, in your age group? That includes some of you teens and young adults. Have you cared for someone older than you, not just your friends? When was the last time you did that? Everything starts with, where do I fit in? I think the same three questions were true 2 generations before. Who am I? Where's my identity? Where do I belong? But I think the order shifted a little bit. I think a lot of times people found their identity in church, and then that's where they belonged. And I think that's semi-true even for people in my age group a little bit. But I think even more so now it's, do I belong there? Oh, now I can find my identity. Do I feel welcomed in that building or by that person? And then the identity comes in Christ. So I want to push you to think about that, because I think a lot of people think they're going to come and then we can pour into them. But it's kind of the flow A lot of things is they want to feel relationship and feel belonged and cared for, and then they come and are part of a community. And these are not my statistics. Fuller Seminary did this book, huge in-depth study on 250 churches of all different places, sizes, and the same 3 questions came up in theirs. And it was identity, view of themselves, belonging, connection with others, and purpose, contribution to the world is how they phrased it. Connection with others leads to community. Just like Christ, if they were connected to Christ, they felt loved. That's what this command in 1 John is all about. We are to love the younger generation. We are to love the older generation. You should be loving all people. Not just your comfort zone of somebody that looks like me or my age, or let's have a relationship with them. And I think about a story of my friend Matt. He's a pastor up in Longmont. And this story sticks out to me of somebody loving, like just the relationship that's been built. So there's this 72-year-old guy who is like, they have besties with a 27-year-old new Christian now. They have coffee every Saturday. And that relationship came because of the church, but also the 27-year-old seeking, but also the 72-year-old asking, do you want to go have coffee? Like out of the blue. And the 27-year-old was seeking that. Because some of that generation don't have grandparents anymore. So they're missing that voice of wisdom. So I want to challenge you guys, because if you ask, statistics show people will say yes to hanging out because of the loneliness epidemic. And easy things are, like table talk, is sharing stories. So you be willing to share a little bit of yourself in that conversation will open that door, because they feel like they're in a relationship with you. And this is not new. It's also in the Old Testament, in the Shema. That's in Deuteronomy 6, 4-8. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These commandments that I give to you today are to be on your hearts. It's not new. It wasn't Jesus creating something new. It's been by law and Jewish law throughout the whole Bible, you can see. But I do want to point out that it says, hear, O Israel. Listen. Listen to me and listen to the person you're having a conversation with first. Listen. Because how can you love someone if you don't know what they're saying or where they're at? How can you be God and love others if you're not listening to Him? And it's nothing hard, but also hard at the same time, because you have to be vulnerable to ask someone. But it's as simple as, do you want to come over for dinner, or meet for dinner if you don't feel comfortable having people in your house yet, or the person. But remember, we are to walk as Christ walked. Love should be our guide to disciple others. And I mean, when I say disciple others, I mean be in relationship. We are the light to those around us. In verse 8, so just after the verses we read today, I am writing you a new command. Its truth is seen in Him and in you, because the darkness is passing and the true light is already shining. Think about people in your world that you see daily that maybe you can have a conversation with. Maybe find out what they're struggling with and how you could fill a little need. But when was the last time, again, I challenge you, you had a conversation with someone not in your generation, not your friend, and not your family member? Table Life is all about being a good neighbor, my friend's book. And I want to share a little story about my neighborhood. So I live in a townhome area in Castle Rock, and I didn't know any of my neighbors. I'm the single person that moved in. It's hard to build relationships sometimes, but I got a dog. Not saying you have to get a dog. I wanted a dog, but I started walking with my dog. And guess what everybody wanted to do is see the dog. If you have a baby or a kid, it's easier to. But all they did was come up to Freckles, and then I realized I was getting to know my neighbors. And I invited them to a pancake and pumpkin feed. So they were supposed to bring pumpkins to paint or carve, and I had pancakes. And that was the first thing I did with about 12 people showed up, which is a lot. I was not really prepared for 12, but good thing pancakes are easy to make and fast. But I had a meal, and then some of them brought food because they're like, well, we're having a meal. We should have other things with your pancakes. And I didn't even ask them to do that. But the simple thing was meeting them because I was going on a walk with my dog and asking them, hey, do you want to, and I gave them an invite, you want to come to my house next Saturday? I'm having a pumpkin and pancake feed. Nothing about complication, just inviting and being loving to my neighbors. But do you know your neighbors? It's a good question to ponder. But when I had them over, then they're like, when's the next one going to be? Well, I don't know. This is just one-time thing at the moment. But then we did a Friendsgiving in between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And then we just keep doing them about every other month. And it's growing. So now we're at the clubhouse. But now I know what some of my neighbors are struggling with. One of them was going through cancer, and our little neighborhood was like, okay, we got to give rides, and, we got to work with her and help her out. But that's so cool. And it was a simple task of inviting for food and have conversations and share stories, sharing your life with someone. That's why people belong, when you share your stories. And I want to push you to share your story with someone in the next, might give you a couple weeks, but share a piece of your story with your neighbor, with the barista, with the grocery store clerk, whatever it is. I know that you can have a conversation with people in towns like this. That's what I love, because they aren't in a rush all the time. But how do you love? How do you walk as Christ walked, like we're commanded? We do it every day, but how can you do it more intentionally? If you went and asked your young adults and teens in this community, what they struggle with most in life, what do you think it would be? What do you think these young people would say right here? Have you asked them that? Or they're here because they're here? And then you young people, have you asked what the other people are struggling most with life? No? Kind of? I see a shake of the head. Sorry, I'm pointing you out. Yeah, that's my challenge. Do you know someone in another generation? And that I want to leave with you is disciple is learned by walking with others. What small step can you do this week to reach someone in your life? Think about a person that you want to reach, because then you're prepared, and the Lord is putting that person on your mind, so then you might have an opportunity to do so. Remember, who am I? Where do I fit in? And what should I do in life? 3 simple questions, but everyone, especially in millennials and Gen Z, is who am I, where do I fit in, and what should I do? What's my purpose in life? And if you want to know more, I have more I could say on those things, but I want to go back to the verse from today. 1 John 2, 4 and 5. 4, 5 through 6. 4, 5, and 6. Whoever says, I know him, but does not do what he commands is a liar, and the truth is not in that person. But if anyone obeys his word, love for God is truly made complete in them. This is how we know we are in him. Whoever claims to live in him must live as Jesus did. We must walk as Christ walked, meaning love your neighbor and love God. Okay, will you pray with me? Lord, I just hope that we're convicted to everyone in this room to get to know someone in the next week or two that's not next to them, that's not in their generation, that's seeking you or hoping to belong somewhere. The loneliness in a lot of people is higher than we think. And if we just start with conversations in our community, that's a step forward. And then we can be more brave and ask people outside this church community, and how can we love our neighbor? How can we love the barista, the grocery store clerk, etc.? May you convict our hearts and our minds. In your name, amen.